Okay. Good morning.
Good morning. April Fools?
Yes, in April Fools, that's right. My name is Samantha Nadler. I work for the Tennessee Suicide Prevention Network. I'll tell you though, I'm not here as an employee of TSPN. This is something that I'm just very passionate about, and this is my first time presenting on this topic. So I mention that because this is a very personal thing for me too. And so any feedback that you can give at the end of this about how to make this better would be helpful, because I really want to do more than just conference workshops with this information. So what we're going to be talking about is behavior modification programs. How many of you have known someone to have been sent to like a wilderness program, a boot camp, or know someone who sent their kid there? Okay. So that's really what this is going to be about. We were talking about child abuse 2 days ago, and at the beginning of the conference during the plenary session. And whenever we talk about child abuse, we talk about it in home settings. And we do tend to talk about it in institutional settings too, but what if it's a setting that's supposed to be treating your kid? That's the piece that people aren't really talking about, because they're supposed to be providing mental health treatment. And so that being said, this is going to be pretty casual. Feel free to stop and ask me questions at any point, because this is not really a set curriculum. This is just what I've put together. So what I plan to do with you today is spend about 30 minutes or so sharing personally why I'm talking about this, because I think it's in order for you to understand why this topic is so important, you need to hear firsthand how this has impacted not only me, but a lot of people that I care about. And again, this is an issue that no one really is aware of if you don't know someone who's been sent to a behavior modification program. After I share some information about my experience, I'm going to go into the history of behavior modification programs and briefly what exactly I'm talking about when I say behavior modification programs, and basically what we know, what we don't know, and what we need to do moving forward with that. So that's kind of my plan for today. So I'll start off with sharing my personal experience. So I love pictures from the internet, especially memes. And I found this morning, and I was like, this is perfect. And it says, let's go on vacation, they said, for 3 years. And it's funny, but it's true. So I got sent to a place called Achievement Valley Ranch. It was in Westmoreland, Tennessee. I'm originally from New York, and that's how I ended up here in the States. So it's really funny when people say, oh, you're not from here? Where are you from? How did you get here? And I'm like, it's kind of a funny story, sort of. So what I was dealing with, I was 16. I chronically dealt with suicidal thoughts, had made 7 attempts on my life, was really struggling with mental health, specifically with anxiety, which I didn't realize at the time, and depression, and had, like a lot of us, had a very dysfunctional family that I was living with, and wasn't really coping with that well. And the source of conflict for me was my stepmother. So, and because I'm the oldest of 5 kids, I was the first one to really be having issues with her. So it was a reflection on me and not on what was happening in the environment. Also, trauma-informed care really didn't exist then. So that being said, a lot of the things that I was going through wasn't being looked at as she is responding to A, B, and C. It's that she's not behaving well. So basically, after my final hospitalization in New York, and that was prompted by my dad calling the police because I was having a big blow up with he and his wife, I had been basically sent to a troubled teens program in Westmoreland. And so what happened was on May 11th, 2005, so we're coming up on 10 years actually, so the timing of this is very interesting for me. On May 11, 2005, I was woken up at 3 in the morning by 2 complete strangers telling me that, what we say is not negotiable, and you can do this the easy way or the hard way, but you were coming with us. And I was tired. I'll say this because of the mental health issues I was having and these very confrontational arguments. I was highly medicated. Just to give you, how many of you are familiar with Seroquel in some form? I was prescribed 300 milligrams a night of Seroquel. That's what you give to people who are like hallucinating. And I was taking that just because they felt at the time that I was impulsive and couldn't control my behavior. Once again, no one was looking at trauma, they were looking at the behavior and just that. So I was taking 300 milligrams of Seroquel a night, to give you an idea of what it was like being woken up at 3 a.m. on that kind of a dose. And I'm pretty sure, I don't know for certain, but I think I was actually given more than my prescribed amount that particular night because I had been able to fight off the sedation, like being on the computer, and MySpace was just starting up, so I would, that was very stimulating for me. And that particular night, I remember having a hard time staying awake. And at this point, my medicine was being crushed and given to me because one of my last attempts was me cheeking my medication and then hoarding it to overdose on. So they needed to crush the medicine. So that being said, I had no way to verify really if I was taking the amount that was prescribed. So that is just, I have no hard evidence of that, and that will never be admitted to me, but I feel like that particular night I was probably given a little bit more so I could be cooperative. So these two strangers woke me up and searched my clothes that I was going to put on, and escorted me down the stairs. My dad and his wife were standing in the kitchen, didn't say anything to me, and grabbed a bag and walked me out the door. So I knew that my parents were in on this because I saw them standing there watching this, but I didn't really have any communication with them. They wouldn't come near me, didn't talk to me. I wasn't told where I was going. I was basically told that if you can behave from here to the destination, over time we can tell you pieces of information. So I was driven to Long Island Airport, and from there we took a flight into DC, and the connection we had to DC took us here to Nashville. And it was in DC that I was being told that I was going to Tennessee to a residential boarding school. So, and I've known people to go to that. So in my head I'm going, okay, boarding school. Like school, dorms, therapists.
Riding horses.
Yeah, like all this really, I was like, okay, that's cool. As I wanted to be sent away. I had asked to get sent away because I didn't like where I was. And I knew I wasn't healthy living in my environment. The shoelaces were taken out of my shoes, so I couldn't run. And they really had no reason to think that I would have, but, based on the fact that I was this angry, troubled teen, they just took those precautions. And we flew into Nashville, and this was my first time in the South, by the way, this experience. So just to give you an idea, I grew up right outside of New York City, so I was like, this is interesting. But Nashville, I'm like, all right, Nashville, which Westmoreland is an hour outside of Nashville. It's on the Sumner County, Macon County border, right by Lafayette and Portland, if you're not familiar with that area. We pull up to a house, and that's on a lot of land, and I get out, and I'm in my Grateful Dead shirt, and highly medicated, and they let me out of the car and give me my bag, and this was the school I was at, the school. I'm greeted by one of the owners, and it's explained to me that I am at a Christian troubled teens program. Let me say this, I was raised Jewish, so I was really confused why I got sent to a Christian school. It's like, this must be a mistake. They must have not known that. But that kind of threw me off, because I wasn't raised that way. And any Christian experiences I had were Northern, Catholic, so very different than Southern Baptist practices. So, just to give you, give you an idea of what I stepped into, and no warning that this was what was happening. So I got there and I talked to one of the staff members, and of course the first thing out of my mouth is, how long do people stay here? Because at this point I was recognizing that it was probably going to be a little bit before I got there. When this morning started, I was wondering, like, am I going to be back in time for work this afternoon? Like, I had a shift, I had to go to, you know, my job, and I had asked them that, and they didn't answer. So by, you know, and like slowly throughout the day as we're traveling, I'm realizing like I'm not coming back today, maybe even not this week. I really didn't realize how long I'd be gone. So I got sent there, I asked how long people stay, and they said, well, the minimum is 6, but usually people stay 8 to 12 months. And at 16, that was like, oh my God, that's like the rest of my high school like career, that's it, like I'm done. No internet access, no contact with friends. None of them knew what happened to me. I just disappeared. And actually a group of friends of mine went to the police because they knew I was struggling. You know, they knew things weren't good at home, and I just suddenly disappeared, didn't show up to school one day. And that was it. So I get there, and you get this 2-week grace period where you can figure out kind of the rules and acclimate to that setting, because it's a really big change. And it was interesting because I wasn't allowed to talk about the fact that I was Jewish, because they thought I was trying to manipulate my way out of the program. Which was funny because, of course, like fast forward 2 months later, one of the owners said she had been to Israel and knew all these Hebrew prayers, and I was like, oh, like this one, and like this one, and this one, and she was like, oh, where'd you learn that? I'm Jewish. I was raised that way, hence why I know them. That's when they believed me. It took that. But up until that point, I wasn't allowed to talk about that. I had been specifically put on some sort of restriction to keep me from talking about how I was raised. So to give you an idea of what this program is like, they was based on a leveling system. So you came in at level 1, and you graduated once you were at level 5. Level 1 was the easiest level to get out of, because all you needed to do was write an autobiography, a page for each year that you were alive. So it ended up being like 16, 17 pages. Yeah. Which, believe it or not, that's actually not that hard to do when you're writing about your life from start to end. Had to read Reviving Ophelia and write a book report. And then we would get a guts letter. And this is the letter that your parents send to you, telling you exactly why you're there and what they hope that you will accomplish while you're there. I'll say this, my family, my dad specifically, was very inactive as far as treatment goes. That's why hospitals and family therapy didn't work, because, you know, it was expected for me to change and for them to, you know, continue doing what they were doing. It took 2 months to get my guts letter. Most people get it within the week that they're sent there. So I kind of just hung out there waiting for this letter so that way I can like kind of get started in my process. They actually leveled me up before I got my guts letter, simply because it took so long to get that. Received the letter, and you were supposed to respond to it, and so I did that. So the way that the levels were defined by like the stages of grief. So, you know, the first stage you were in was denial when you got sent there. Yes, sir.
How did you react to this guts letter?
That's a good question. You know, I don't remember what I said, but I imagine, knowing me, and actually still having the letter that I received, and knowing what kind of situation I was in, it was like, all right, play the game. Do the thing you're supposed to do. So I wrote back, and I was like, you're right, I'm bad, I need to fix this, thanks for sending me, like, you know, completely just trying to say the right thing, because I'll say this too, they read all outgoing mail. So they knew what I was saying, they knew what was being said to me, and that was one of the direct forms of documentation that they can use to promote you or demote you. So I'm pretty sure, knowing me and how freaked I was very like, I'm really sorry, and I understand you sent me away, and, you know, I'm gonna get fixed, I promise. And really, I mean, you go into this setting thinking like, I'm a bad person, I'm a bad kid, like, I'm so bad my family can't even handle me, and so I deserve to be here, and I deserve what I'm getting. And obviously, this place is good because my parents sent me here. And P.S. it was $3,500 a month. A month.
So
that's more than I make right now.
That way, or you just started saying it to yourself?
I think.
Did you start thinking that was?
Yeah, eventually I did get to that place where I felt like, I mean, and I'll read you some stuff that, like, I have a lot of, it's interesting, I have a lot of documentation of my experience there, because they required us to journal a page every day. So this is 2 years of, that's right, 2 years of documentation. So these little sticky notes that I have here, it's because I started going through a process where, I'm getting out of myself, but I started going through a process where it's like, you know, I'm far enough out from that experience. I wonder what kind of, as a social worker now, and having a few steps back from it, what stuff were they doing that really you're not supposed to be doing? Now having the education to kind of back it up besides feeling this isn't right. And I stopped here because I couldn't read anymore, because this is starting to not be helpful when you have a sticky note on every page of your journal telling you, you know, this was going on, this was going on. So leveling system, you know, and you know, they define each level based on like behaviors that you were supposed to be exhibiting and what should be happening with you during that time. And staff would vote on your levels. They used to have meetings every month, and where they would talk about who's deserving to be promoted up and everything. They had a lot of rules, like rules that you have to fold your dirty laundry. You can't talk when a staff member isn't in the room. Yes ma'am, no sir to every single thing, which I understand to a point, but for every single thing, as a northerner, that was really weird for me. You're not allowed to talk about why you think you're sent there. You're not allowed to talk to other level 1s or level 2s because there were so many rules. Often higher levels had to make suggestions to lower levels, like, hey, your shirt needs to be tucked in, hey, this should be going on. If you were a lower level, you couldn't do that. So lots of rules, and this is just what I'm just recalling my memory at this point. I don't, you know, there are way more than that, and I'm sure I'll remember as we're talking, but it was a lot. Basically, a really easy way to get in trouble all the time. Communication was very limited outside of the program. If your communication with your parents varied on what level you were on. So if you were at level 1, it was a month before you got to talk to your parents on the phone. And you could only write to your parents. And as you increased in level, you were allowed to write to more family members, but I was never able to talk to my friends. I'll also say this, my mom didn't have custody of us, obviously, and that's why I was with my dad and his wife. My mom had no idea that I got sent to this place until my parents went to court. My parents were my dad was taking my mom back to court again, and actually the court date was 2 weeks after I got sent away, and I was of age where I could speak for myself, and suddenly I just disappeared. So I couldn't. And my mom had no idea what happened to me until they went to court, because she had no custodial rights. She didn't get a say. And the judge supported my dad. They actually ended up turning this whole thing into like I'm behaving the way I was because of my mom and that she was a bad influence, when it wasn't that simple. You got more privileges as you leveled up. So, you know, communication, visits, writing privileges, you know, what you were allowed to do, how you were allowed to wear your hair on Sundays, what you were allowed to wear on Sundays, you name it. You know, they made it possible to, you know, have some sort of restriction on you. And eventually, later on in the program, they implemented hats. And a color hat was different for every level that you were on. And it was so that way, the owners of the program could be far out in the distance, but still see the heads, and we were all wearing like bright colors. And so if you were demoted or you were level 1 or 2, you were wearing No, if you were lower level, you had to wear red. If you were demoted, you had to wear orange. So demoted means you were in trouble. You were in a lot of trouble. You were wearing yellow if you were a level 3, and then if you were level 4 or 5, you wore green. So that way they could kind of see, like, who's not supposed to be together, you know, do we have a bunch of, like, lower levels hanging out, and they didn't actually have to be there. So that was kind of interesting. So we all had to wear hats, all had to wear our hair up, no makeup, no razors. No razors, which means no shaving your legs. As a woman, that was terrible, because you could have an electric razor, but no, yeah, I mean, most of us were like, forget it, I don't see in our legs, I don't care. So that's good, and that's just like a taste of what that was like. So what our day was you'd wake up at 5 in the morning. You'd have 30 minutes to get dressed, organize your space, and then you'd go down for breakfast, and everything was based on seniority. So if you were, you know, waiting to make your phone call to your parents, or if you were waiting in line to get food, it was always based on who was there longest, and who was there most recently. So if you were a new person, you were low man on the totem pole for everything. Yes, sir.
This keeps sticking in my head as a social worker too. I need to go back to your mother, and I don't know if you want to share that.
No, that's fine.
Why did she lose custody?
She, that's a good question. She was using substances in my house while basically, long story short, my dad had an affair with the woman he eventually married. As you can see, that was one of many reasons why I didn't like her. They had a whole nother family, and it basically broke apart, you know, my parents' marriage. Obviously, there were a lot of things going on. My mom didn't respond well, started dabbling in substance use, and so when they went to go fight for custody, they drug tested my parents. My dad shaved his head. Mom was tested positive for crack cocaine. So that was basically, so it was supposed to be a temporary loss of custody, and it ended up being full-blown. She didn't have a good lawyer, my dad did, and yep, yeah.
Did she start taking drugs after the breakup or the?
Yeah, I mean, my parents have a long history of recreationally using together, and so that's why my dad knew to.
But there wasn't any
mental health is
with
also.
your mother?
Oh yeah, anxiety runs rampant in our family, and in depression and all the fun stuff. So yes, I do have a family history of mental illness and substance use that I had no idea about really until I was having these issues, and I didn't realize the extent to which the family history.
She was probably on medication. She was probably medicated before taking crack cocaine too. Probably.
Exactly. Oh yeah, on and off. Antidepressants for sure. Yeah. Okay. So there were a lot of. Yeah. No, I was like, there was a lot that I had been through, and I was like, and I'll get into that too later. But trauma, you know, for a kid, and being the oldest, I really took the brunt of my parents' stuff. You know, I ended up being like a friend for my mother because I was the oldest. Like she was borrowing money from me, and I was 10. You know, it wasn't healthy. Yeah. So that's kind of what was going on. So your typical day when you got up, so you breakfast, you know, you did the thing, and then you went and did chores. We were on a farm. So, you know, we would have to go feed the horses and the goats and the cows, and you would end up doing what we called a work project. You did a work project for 5 hours. And there was a ranch foreman who kind of oversees what you were doing, and we were building fences, or we were dragging and burning trees, and and sawing them down. We were, flipping goat hooves. We were birthing cows. We were, for a New Yorker, if someone put me on a farm now, I think I can handle it pretty well. But, lots of different farm work. It was, there was physical labor involved, packing horse feed up a really steep hill on your back.
Is this, excuse me, is this all day long, or do they take you do it in the morning, you have classes in the afternoon, you talk?
You did it for 5 hours, and then after that you would do school.
Okay.
So what school was, so then you'd have lunch, and then you'd have school, and school was you sitting in a classroom going through this homeschooling program that's through Keystone, which is in Pennsylvania. And so we had a teacher there on site to help with homework, but it was like all self-study. So, you know, you'd get a textbook and you'd get this like curriculum, and it was self-taught at your own pace. And at the time I just found out that my 10th grade credits didn't go through because I had been to 3 different schools in that year. And so it didn't add up, and so I had to actually retake my 10th year. But I did my sophomore, junior, and senior year in less than a year because it was self-paced. So I took advantage. I was like, awesome, yes, I will just knock this out and be done. So I actually graduated a year earlier than I was supposed to. So you did that, and then, you know, evening you would do, depended on what was going on. Sometimes we would go work out, sometimes we would do chapel, which that was very interesting for me because I didn't grow up like the way people grew up here. And it was the first time I ever heard that homosexuality was a sin and that people believed that. And it was very interesting for me because I grew up in New York and had, you know, I grew up with an aunt who was gay and in a committed relationship my whole life. So like it was never a point of discussion of whether this was okay or not. It just was, and it was very normal. So to not only hear that there were people today, and like, well, at that point, 2005, who believed that, that kind of like blew my mind a little bit. That was very hard for me to grasp, and then realize that this was the setting that was going to have a say on whether or not I left. So, you know, having to kind of accommodate my beliefs or their beliefs and like put my stuff aside in order to get out was really challenging for me. So consequences. That was a whole system in itself. I mean, of course, you know, you have all these privileges, all these rules. You got to have some consequences in there to deter the behavior. So it would range from, you know, writing laps. So that would be like one sentence a million times, like the old school way that, you know, that we think of. Then you could walk laps. That's pretty, you know, harmless. Then it would be graduated to wheelbarrows if you were really in trouble. So it'd be a wheelbarrow full of logs, and you'd be, you know, pushing that up and down. So it's harder than walking a lap, right? So you wouldn't want to do that. I said the F word once, and this was when they reinstated pushing a tractor tire. And so I had to push a big tire that was like about the size of me around this like pond, which, you know, after doing it once was about half a mile. Which I still felt like saying the F word was worth it. It was a total accident, but I was like, that's fine. I love that word too much to not. So I did that, and then they would have consequence food. So if you were in trouble, if you were in like some serious trouble, instead of having the lunch that everybody else had, you might have something that's gross, or something that is less than what everybody else was eating. So
what's gross?
All right, well, plain oatmeal in the morning, or plain grits. For lunch, you could be eating hominy, or beanie weenies, or Vienna sausages, which I loved. I didn't mind that. I was like, I never had gotten in trouble while I was there, like some serious trouble where I would have to eat consequence food, and thank God for that. So things like that. Worst case scenario was pickled pig's feet.
Oh, sounds good.
Yeah. So that was one way that they would handle consequences. Of course, you know, taking away privileges, you could be demoted, which meant, you know, you were basically on pause in the program as far as progress. They would take you down a level, you know, and you were only allowed to eat consequence food. You couldn't have what everyone else was having. So it was a pretty stressful setting. So yes.
Any time for counseling sessions in there?
Yeah, good question. You would see, so that reminds me of the next piece of it. So staffing, let me tell you about that. Because I know you're all wondering who is running this.
Do me a favor,
Yes.
go back, when you said demoted, how long a period was that? Was
Oh,
that
it
until
just-
your behavior changed, or that time period was
It's,
set?
well, there was a set period, but you know, if they found something, they would extend it, which, you know, considering how many rules there were, it was very easy to mess that up. You could very much, you know, extend that, and usually, you know, we were teenagers, there was just a point where we got pissed, and it was like, you know, and you catch us on a bad moment, and you say something, and it was like, well, that's a week. We're like, all right, cool, neat, really, there were times where I remember, like, you know, there's just a point where, as a teenager, you just want to fight back, and you're kind of like, whatever, what does it matter, like, no matter what I'm doing, I'm screwing up, so there would be some times where, like, a teen would be, you know, just arguing, and they'd be like, all right, that's one wheelbarrow, all right, that's two. And they just keep adding, and it makes, you know, and it further agitates them, you know, and it doesn't de-escalate the situation. It was easy to kind of get us all ramped up. So staffing. This program was started by a couple named Martha and Eric Larson. And Eric Larson used to work for another Troubled Teens program called Turnabout Ranch in Utah, Escalante, Utah. And Martha had sent her son there, and that is how they met. So, his experience was, I have a master's in counseling, and hers was, I've been the mother of a troubled teen, and I know exactly what they need, and blah, 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 even though no one was looking at the fact that her teen that was sent there wasn't doing any better, and didn't really have a relationship with her at this point. So it doesn't mean it was a good thing, but...
So she decided she was qualified.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. And so Eric was the most educated person on staff. That was the counselor. And he wasn't licensed in the state either. Everybody else, it ranged from no high school diploma to a bachelor's degree. No one with mental health training. You know, and the bachelor's degree was like teaching, or, you know, for our teacher, or like pastoral, like something with like ministry. And so, needless to say, we had very unqualified people. Now let me back up and say, there were a handful of staff there that I would not have survived that place without, and these were the people who, you know, weren't in mental health. They, you know, were locals who just really cared about the kids and wanted to be there for us. And I am forever in debt to what they did, because they stuck out. Like, there were times where they almost quit and stayed because they knew that they were our best advocate. So I'm not saying that there absolutely needs to be education 100% across the board, because the people who were doing the most effective work with us were the people who were just being compassionate with us. So that was the staffing system. What else could I tell you?
How many kids were there?
About 20, 24, so about, well, I saw someone as young as 11 get sent there, and as old as 17. Of course, you know, once you're 18, you know, then it's a choice for you if you want to be there or not. So that's what a typical day looked like. That you had to be up until like 10 o'clock at night. You know, usually you were, at this point, you know, you were writing in your journal, you were maybe catching up on your letters, doing showers and all of that, and so you went to bed at 10, you know, woke up, did the same thing the next day. And we did that.
Do you feel those helped you?
I'm sorry?
Do you feel that sitting helped you?
No, I don't. And I'll get into the reasons why. I think I did for a really long time. I wanted to believe that I didn't go through this for nothing. And it took a really long time to realize that what I went through personally was not helpful. I think I'm doing well despite the fact that I went through that. Because I'll say this, and this is not a like yay me, because this is not something I'm proud of, but I'm one of the more high functioning people who have come from that place. Which I'm getting my head ahead of myself, but yeah, it's yeah.
That was gonna be my next question, which you may tap into later.
Mhm.
Are you still in contact with
Yes.
like, the counselors or those that you felt helped you, and then some of the people that are there?
Yeah, I'm actually more connected. I'm one of the more connected students from there as far as like peers and staff, and it's because I stayed here. So I was like, let me talk about that real quick, because that's an important.
And it's still open?
No, thank God.
Oh.
No, no. Let me say this place is no longer in existence. But
What's the name of this place?
Achievement Valley Ranch. It was in Westmoreland, Tennessee.
Oh.
So I'll tell you. I've mentioned like generally like what kind of consequences have happened. I'll tell you 3 interesting experiences I had while I was there. And these are just the ones that I can remember. I once was on a 25-foot restriction from one of my peers because every time we got together, we treated it like a party. Which just meant we were trying to like have fun. We were trying to make the best of what was going on. So there was a long time there where like I was not allowed to be talking to this girl or, you know, in the same room with her. We had to be on opposite sides, you know, just 25-foot restriction for like 2 months, I think. On the flip side of that, there was a girl who I didn't get along with, and we got tied together during a trip in Utah. And so we had like actually like a latch that like kept us together. And like I had to be around her all the time. And it's funny because we laugh about it now because I'm friends with these girls. And, you know, and this particular girl, she lives here in Nashville. And we'll joke about the time that we were tied together because like it sounds so crazy now. But
What you do when you use the bathroom?
she had to stand right outside. And vice versa, and we were on a trip for this, so we were in a sleeping bag together. We had to we zipped 2 sleeping bags together, but so it fit both of us, but we had to share a sleeping bag. Like there was never a time where we were not together for a couple of days.
I had a in slavery session yesterday, and this kind of sounds like how they program people that they kidnap.
Yeah, it's. My ex, he met me while I was still kind of in this place, and you know, explaining this to anybody is like, I don't even know how to like. This is why I don't have notes, because it's like there's just so much weird information that comes with it. But we would joke and call it kidnap camp, because that's how most of us got sent there. If we were not escorted, then this happened. So let's go on vacation. They would, you know, a family would be like, we're going to go to the mountains. And then they would show up here. They'd be like, bye. And surprise. Yeah. So, yeah. So this made me laugh because I was like, oh man, I know so many people who went on vacation. And it was not vacation. So, yeah, exactly. So that was pretty rough. This is a picture of us. That's me. But the hats.
You were at level 4?
I was a higher level then.
Wow, congrats.
Thanks. Yeah, I was gonna say, and we got someone in trouble here.
Oh.
And then these were all lower levels. And it's funny because,
People take pictures? Wow.
well, that's a really funny thing that she mentioned, and I'm so glad I'm videoing this because my friends are gonna see this and they're gonna laugh. So we did have cameras for a period of time. Man, I should have put this picture in the presentation. Then I got the cameras taken away because it's so stupid. Because we were on like a monthly activity, and you know, we were in the bathroom being silly, taking pictures, and one of my friends was in the next stall, and I, you know, had made a joke like, "Oh, I'm gonna take a picture, haha," and like put my camera over the stall. Well, then someone told on us. And they were like, no cameras ever. So there's like a good gap of like no photos from this place because we didn't have, like we weren't allowed to have them. So, and this is when they had brought them back. So it's funny you mentioned that because we still have this really funny photo of like 3 of us standing on a toilet and like at Cece's Pizza or something. And it's like the photo that like ended all cameras for a really long time. And it was right before Christmas too, so like it was like a whole big ordeal, and yeah, it was funny. I thought it was funny. So there's this really funny Facebook page. I've been like getting connected with groups on Facebook of people who've been through what I've gone through at this place, and then I saw this meme. And it made me laugh so hard because I was like, yeah, like this is very validating. Just level 1 things, like food restriction, like you couldn't have like plain oatmeal, water, bread. It was so validating to see that. I'm like, other places did that too. It wasn't just us, but it made me laugh because, you know, what else are you going to do about it now? So I'll tell you how I ended up kind of staying here. So I went there May 11th of 2005, and I received my final level. Well, I can tell you right now, I guess, because I've got it on the. I was tracking when I was receiving my levels, when I was supposed to receive them, and then when I got them. And I scratched it out because you weren't supposed to do that. So level 1, okay. Level 2 I got June 18th. I was supposed to get it June 2nd. I was eligible for it then. I was eligible for level 3 July 22nd, and I didn't get it until
That's all
September.
2005?
And I didn't get it until September. I was eligible for level 4 in October, and I didn't get it until February. I was eligible for level 5 in March, and I didn't get it until May.
Why did you not?
Because they felt like I was plateauing. They felt like I wasn't real. I was talking the talk, but not walking the walk.
Now, these are non-qualified people.
Yes.
telling you.
Exactly.
They want money.
Right. For $3,500 a month.
Yeah.
Which is
Bring it.
I would love to make for $3,500 a month. That would be wonderful.
Like, I guess my thing is, they didn't take your journal
See, well,
unless you was.
they said they didn't, but this is why I started writing song lyrics in a lot of my entries, because I was like, like if I put what I, like, because they said they were, but I know that they did. I know that they did. So, because they would find out stuff that you just can't figure, you can't just know. So I got my last level when I was 17, and that night my dad had called the program and was like, look, my wife really doesn't want her back. Like, we haven't made any progress at home. So I think she's gonna need to stay there. And they were like, okay. And yeah, $3,500 a month,
Yeah.
not a
And
problem.
here's an extra 10,000, make sure she's.
Exactly. So I was 2 months into me being 17, so I had 10 months until I was 18. So I was really kind of in a screwed situation because I wasn't of age to make a choice, but these people had temporary guardianship over me that was signed over to them. Yep, that's a request that they make. If you're going to send your kid to us,
So
we
the
need to.
Larsons had.
They had temporary guardianship over me. Yeah. And what I have learned since then, through therapy, was that even that being said, I no longer met qualifications for being in those services. So the fact that my parents were like, bye, that was enough of a reason to call DCS and say that this kid's been abandoned here. And nobody did that. Nobody told me I had that right to have that reported. I had no idea. I was just like, I'm just stuck here, whatever. So I was part of the program still, but I had finished my requirements, but I couldn't leave, so I still needed to follow the rules. And that was really hard. And so I'm not able to talk to her. Court ordered. That court date that came 2 weeks after I left, that was the result of it. Supervised visits, supervised phone calls, and no phone calls at all. Supervised cards where she could only say love mom or I love you mom. And so, and that was only on holidays. So like there was no way for me to tell anybody anything. And at that point, I was buying it. I was totally all in, like I was converted, I had been saved, it was the whole thing. Yes,
I'm
ma'am.
worried about that someday. So.
Yep.
No, I'm just. What is your relationship with both of your parents today?
Thank you for asking that. It's actually, good. I'm actually closer with my dad than I am with my mom, believe it or not. Which is, I know, I never thought I'd say that. But here in recent years, you know what it is though? Is that my dad has finally put aside how I feel about his wife and has allowed me to have a relationship regardless of where things are at with her. Because I'll tell you, I haven't been in that house since then. The very last time I was in that house, welcomed in that house, was then. So, that's not any different. She literally thinks I'm still the same person that I was 10 years ago and has made no efforts to know me. So, yeah, it's it's messed up. So, but my relationship is surprisingly very good. And I'm actually graduating with my MSW in 6 weeks, and both my parents are going to be here. Yeah, so both my parents are going to be here. That's going to be a trip. I am really excited. We're going to play Cards Against Humanity. They don't know it yet, but I'm going to make them. They don't know it.
It's an awesome game.
Yes. So I have a lot, I told you, I have a lot of like stuff from this place, and so I blocked out a lot of memories. I remember things, but like it usually requires me going through stuff. I have a lot of mail that I received while I was there, and also I have some letters that I wrote and never sent, mainly because I was told you're not eligible to write to your aunt and uncle yet. So this is one of those letters, and this is January of 2006. And I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but I'm going to read things that I said about this place, because you could tell like how brainwashed I was at this point. And also just what was going on. So I'm so sorry that I haven't written to y'all since I've been here. I haven't been allowed to yet. I'm a level 3.8 at the moment. That's why I'm able to write to you guys now. This is the kind of help I've been needing. Like when I would go to the hospital, they would go all out there to help me, but I never wanted to help myself. I saw it as a vacation from home. Here they give you the tools to help yourself, but you do the work, and you won't be going anywhere if you don't work for it. And you cannot fake it because it's a long-term program. I'm really glad I came here. You guys saw how miserable I was making myself at home. I was so depressing to be around. This is stuff that was being said to me, and so I was regurgitating it, because at some point you have to talk the talk, and then you start believing yourself.
So that's like a cult,
Mm-hmm.
a paid cult.
Yeah.
Now, well, is it anything legal? Was it like juvenile?
I was gonna say, and that's the part we're gonna, I was like, see, all these questions, I was like, so I promise this workshop's not all just me talking about what happened, but it's to kind of give you some context of like, what this place was, how it was run. This was licensed, because all places that house children in residential settings have to be licensed in the state of Tennessee. But there are things.
It sounds like Woodland Hills.
I was going to say, yes, it is a little different, and it's funny you mentioned that. So I think I've given you enough like groundwork to understand kind of, I mean, enough that I could tell you. I can't imagine like what else I've got, but I'll tell you this. I know that we all have had a different experience there. Some people chose to fight back about this. I was someone who just, I'll follow the rules so I can get out. Like, that's just how I was. I was never going to fight this. My friend was put on a talking restriction where she was only allowed to say thank you to everything. Kind of messed up. Not allowed to talk unless she said thank you. They thought she had an eating disorder because she was really skinny. And she got sick while she was there. And they made her eat the same kind of food for a really long time, and she couldn't finish it because it would make her physically ill. She was sick. But then they were like, oh, you can't eat the plain oatmeal? All right, wrap it up and we'll eat it, have it for dinner. And did this for days of like plain oatmeal that she wasn't finishing, and it was the same bowl. Yeah. So let's see, brainwash. Oh yeah. Oh, and here's, I was gonna say, and here's safety issues too. There was one day where we were baling hay, and we were putting the hay up on like a roof, like this loft of a barn, and that roof fell in while we were on it in the barn. And luckily no one got hurt, but someone could have been killed. Like, we had a girl who was standing, basically the barn went from like this to this, so that it just one side collapsed. We had a girl sitting right there right before it happened, and she just so happened to get up and move. If she didn't, that probably would have killed her. So there were safety issues too. This particular.
Did you have anybody try to commit suicide?
Yes, we did, and then they got in trouble for that. Yeah. So here, I was going to say, this is one entry I did want to read because it kind of gives you an idea of how things were handled when you were struggling. And it's funny because I didn't think that I was suicidal while I was there, and then I would read my stuff, and I work in suicide prevention, so I can see warning signs, no problem. So this entry, was pretty sad. So this was August 20th of 2005, so I had been there for about June, July, for about 3 months. So it says, I'm fed up with the bull. I don't see the point in working this out. It's not just clothes, this is a symbol of the relationship between me and my parents. So let me say this, they sent me a package of clothing, and all of them were like 3 sizes too big for me. And like the program saw no problem with that. And in fact, the fact that I was upset about it was like another problem, because they were like, you are so ungrateful. And I'm like, they are sending me clothes that are 3 sizes too big. And this is stuff that they would do at home too. And it, like, you go to school looking like you're freaking homeless, you know, like that's not, you know.
Why would they do that?
Well, it really played on, you know, because it obviously that thought I was so fat that, you know, that I obviously needed clothing that big.
And this would shame you into losing weight?
Yeah. Yeah. And then it says, I miss my mom. Why can't I talk to her? Why is she in court? What did she do? What did I do? What's going on with my sisters? I want to live with Aunt Carla or Aunt Wani or Mom or someone who gives a damn crap about me. Or better yet, let me live by myself or something. I'm almost a level 3 and my relationship with Ani and Dad is the same since when I got here. I've tried everything under the sun to reach out to them. Am I that bad of a person? My mom loves me. I want to be in contact with someone who loves me. Miss Martha told me to be grateful. Why can't someone here understand why I feel this way? I thought that by now they would get what I'm saying, at least see what's happening. Zoe said it'll be taken care of, but it turns to just live with what I have. I am thankful for the clothes, but it's not just that. No one here is getting that. I'm not crying over clothes. I'm crying because I'm frustrated. I'm freaking frustrated. I'm at the flipping end of my rope. I'm at the end of my rope and I'm just tired of it. From this day forward, I'm not going to cry over my parents. I'm done. And basically the way I was treated was like, you're being ungrateful, or like, get over it. So, and this is like that was like about where I stopped reading, because I was like, oh, that got heavy, or I think I'm done. I think I'm done reading that. So that, I'm gonna stop there, like as far as like I'll tell pieces as we go, but that's, I feel like, enough to work with. So, behavior modification. So how did these places exist? How long have they been around? Because they've been around for a really long time, but they went through a big boom about the time that I got sent there. So about like from 2000 to 2007 was really when they were in their prime. That was when, you know, we had reality shows called Brat Camp, and where they were getting sent to wilderness programs and Scared Straight and things like that. So I realize that you can't see this, but it's just kind of an outline. So the very beginning of this field really started with Synanon, and it started in 1958. And so it was originally, it's this pioneered use of harsh behavior modification techniques. And this started as a substance abuse place. So there was a place called Daytop that started in 1963, and it was an anti-drug program for teen units. And so that was a break apart of that. Like basically how these places work is that, you know, there's this one core place that started it all. And then people who worked there left and kind of started their own place and implemented a lot of the things from the previous program that they were at. And so that's how these places will continue to pop up even if a place has been closed. They can go somewhere else and open up a new one and kind of modify it a little bit, call it something else, but it's the same people running it. And that's messed up. Phoenix House started in '67. It says 100 sites in 9 states, including residential academies for teens. And then there was CEDU, and it was founded by a former Synanon member, which was shut down once there were allegations of abuse. So it kind of stopped there. And then Synanon is kind of, it opened the first teen boot camp. That's where we first started seeing these, you know, military style facilities for adolescents. And then we had wilderness programs, and that one started in 1946. So we had a lot of, you know, places called like North Star and Summit Quest, and they've closed because of deaths that happened on their grounds. North Star is specifically known for one particular kid who died, and his parents took the place to court. So then we've got the Elan School, and this was a program that used a boxing ring as therapy.
Ooh.
Yeah, you two just work it out. And then there was the Seed, and it closed in 2001, and it was because they were finding that it was basically brainwashing. You know, the tactics that they were using were brainwashing. And then we had Straight Incorporated. Nancy Reagan endorsed this. So we had people, this is a very politically driven industry. We've had a lot of people, Mitt Romney was someone too who supported these big time. So, you know, you've got a lot of like people in political power who, if they endorse it, well then the parents who have all this money to dish out to the school, you know, then they'll endorse their campaign. So that's what was happening, and Nancy Reagan endorsed this. Straight Incorporated, one of the breakoffs was Christian programs. So tough love with a religious bent. That's what I went through, because it had that piece to it. And it also used the straight model to cure gay teens.
Oh, that worked out.
Yeah, exactly. We know that conversion therapy doesn't work. It hurts people, makes it worse. So Straight Incorporated had 2 breakoffs. It was Kids Incorporated and Pathway Family Center. Pathway Family Center is still around. It is still open, and it is founded by former straight staff. So as you can see, like this is, you know, there's a trickle-down effect. Then there's behaviorist programs inspired by, you know, behaviorism, and it's a state licensed center in Utah. And then there's the Worldwide Association of Specialty Programs, and it was started by Provocanian staff, and it's currently being sued. It's in existence, but it's currently being sued. One of the places it's known for is Tranquility Bay. So it's a place like what I had been through, but in the islands. And so there are even less rights for the kids there, because now they are no longer in their country where they're a citizen. So there are a lot more barriers that come with that. So this is just a very quick overview of kind of how these places exist and they get started, and how they continue to thrive even when, you know, obviously what I know what I've told you, it doesn't sound good. But yet these places, and as you can see, it's like allegations of abuse, brainwashing, boxing ring, child abuse settlements. And this has been going on since '58, and they continue to thrive. No one's like stopping it. And I'll tell you why. So, who was here for the first day of the conference when we were talking about the ACE study? Prevention, okay, good. So the ACE study, it just talks about adverse childhood experiences and the impact of trauma and what that looks like. So for this study, they looked at abuse, neglect, and household dysfunction. So that being said, knowing what you already know about me, parental separation or divorce, household mental illness, household substance abuse, neglect emotional needs, abuse emotionally. So I had about, what was that, 5 or 6? So I was pretty high up there as far as adverse childhood experiences. For this study, they considered that traumatic. Well, now that we know what trauma does to a developing brain, we know that they are more likely to experience these things. Substance abuse, suicide attempts, you know, depression, lots of physical health issue too, multiple sexual partners, risk for intimate partner violence. So let me say this is something I did not realize until within the last year. So I'm probably in contact with about 15 to 20 girls from this place. Every single one of us has ended up in a domestic violence situation since this program. Whether it was psychologically abusive or physically abusive, every single one of us since then has been through this. And I realized it after my last friend went through it, the friend who I got tied to, actually. She was in a local shelter here. She had no idea that I interned for the domestic violence division, and just happened to reach out to me because she knew I was local and would, you know, help her. And as I'm sitting there and I'm like, God, I had just been through that myself, you know, 1.5 years ago, where I was getting an order of protection, and it was from the guy who met me while I was still kind of in the program. So it made sense. It was like, we all keep picking people to be with that treat us terribly, and we somehow think we deserve it. Interesting, because we felt that way when we were in the program too. Like, we were okay with it because obviously we deserve it. And this is what love looks like. It has to be tough. Why did we all pick relationships that do the same thing? I have no research on this. There's no, you know, so I'm like, this is one of my, don't you steal it now. was gonna say, but I want, like, I'm very interested in, like, why is that? Why have we all ended up in that? So,
There isn't research on that? I mean, that sounds about right to me.
like, and that's where we're gonna go. It's like, so let me say this. No one is doing research on this. That's why this is very, pictures, and I'm talking to you because I don't have a whole lot of hard evidence specifically in regards to this stuff. There's an organization called NatSap. They actually had their conference here about a month ago. And I almost went to go sneak into it just to hear what they were saying, and then I decided that was not a good use of my self-care time. But it's an organization of people who, it's basically like this unofficial accrediting body. Or it's a membership organization. It's like NASW for trouble team programs and wilderness programs and A&D places. So they have their own journal of research, of publication. All of the studies are done by the people who run the programs. So it's very biased. And I didn't even know it existed. I'm reading through this and I'm like, oh, sample size of 900. They only collected data for 300. So really you mean your sample size is 300, but you're calling it 900. No, that's not right. You can't do that. And so I'm not saying like it's non-existent, but it's very difficult to find. It's very difficult to find currently because, well, I'll get to that in a second. But there's very little data. There is an article that has come out about troubled youth and basically how it harms. So this one article was actually covered in school, psychological treatments that cause harm. And one of the things it talks about, so scared straight programs attempt to frighten at-risk adolescents away from a life of future crime. So this talks about the straight program, but this specifically talks, yeah, exactly. They have a show on it, and we know that those don't do anything. Boot camp intervention for conduct disorder. Evidence concerning the effects of boot camps on criminal recidivism has been exceedingly mixed. A recent meta-analysis of both RCTs and quasi-experimental studies revealed no significant overall effects of boot camps on antisocial behavior. Similarly, wilderness therapy programs which attempt to teach troubled adolescents coping skills by exposing them to challenging natural environments have been associated with several deaths due to dehydration, drowning, and other causes. So this article even says, we really don't know. We know it doesn't sound good. We know, based on what we know, it doesn't look like it's a good thing, but it's hard to say. Yes, ma'am.
And here's what's so bad. Let's just for a second say that where you were sent was the most perfect place in the entire world. And you were cared for in a loving manner and given all the fabulous therapy that they could ever think of giving you, and all of that went wonderfully. Guess what wasn't happening? Your home wasn't doing all that.
Yeah.
So they can fix you all they want.
Mm-hmm.
But you go right back, and
It's the same exact thing.
and I've got, my professional history goes back to the acting, that's
Mhm.
probably before you were born, but anyway, and so I'm gonna cop to say, I sent people to these places only because it was my job to find placements for kids in state custody.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that also included truly dependent, which I consider you one, a dependent and neglected child. So even if they didn't cause all these problems to people and they got to go live in just a home
Yeah.
with foster parents, and their parents were the worst people in the world who had done amazingly horrible things to them,
Mm-hmm.
we could keep them away from their family right up until they were 18.
Yeah.
But guess where they went when they got to be 18? They
to
went
the
right back
system.
because it's what they know. So that's if a child at 18 is faced with having nowhere to go back to, and having the only place they know, having a family,
Yep.
as opposed to having no family,
Exactly.
they're gonna go back to their family. So that's why you are going back to people who were mimicking the way you were treated as a, you know. I mean,
That's a good point.
That's just
Something like that codependency.
It's like
absolutely.
Stockholm syndrome.
You go
Loving
back-
your abuser.
You go back to what you know, and it's like
Yeah.
okay with you because you know how to operate.
Yeah, because I thrived. I did, but sorry, time check, because my phone is recording, so I was like, just so that way I know where I'm at, because I've never, it's good to know.
10:13.
Shoot, okay. Woo!
Where did you go?
We're almost done.
After you got out?
I was gonna say, so I lived with a staff member. I actually lived with 2 staff members and ultimately lived with my boyfriend who eventually became my husband. I was homeless. I didn't have anywhere to go. So the only people I knew were the people from the program, and I actually ended up working for them for a little bit because I was their great success story. Not that they would know. And so this is what we do know. Licensure does not equal evidence-based practice. We can license a place and say, as long as they're doing this for this group of people and we think it helps, it gets licensed. And also, for licensure, there's a lot of places that get licensed. So that being said, the follow-up of, are they actually doing what they're supposed to do? They've got 1 visit a year that they do on surprise, where they can check that. So one of the things I found through the Department of Licensure here, I've been doing my own research. I actually just the other day asked for records from this place. I wanted to see kind of what they had. And so I was also reading the regulations for licensing, and they have a set of regulations that all clients are, allowed to, all these rights that clients are allowed to have no matter what setting they're in, no matter how old they are. And one of them was uninterfered correspondence by mail, unopened. And I read that and I was like, I'll be damned. That did not happen. And
So that was gonna be my question.
Yeah.
You were saying that your mom could only write good mom.
how would they know?
Right. How would they know what she's writing
Yeah.
if they're not opening up? So
No, they
whatever
were.
you sent out,
They,
so whatever you sent out, they would.
and they were opening incoming mail too. They were opening incoming and outgoing. And the rule for that is you are not supposed to open incoming mail unless the client is present and there is reason to believe that there's something in the package that would danger them or someone else. But they would go as far as even blacking things out of your letter. And if parents wrote to you and said, hey, we're gonna come visit, they would black that out so that way you didn't know. It was supposed to be a surprise. I had no idea that wasn't allowed to happen until like 2 months ago, and I called my dad and I was like, dude, this is really messed up. And we're actually pretty open. I'm like, look, I don't want you to think that I recognize you were making the best decision you thought possible based on the information you had, and I don't fault you for that, because these places also, really target parents who are in crisis and desperate for a fix and don't know what else to do, and they aggravate that by going, if you don't send them now, your kid might die, or they're going to be worse. Yes, ma'am.
Samantha, were you sent there because you were acting out, or just because your family was separated?
All of the above. All of the above. It was there were reasons I understood why I got sent away. I didn't agree with it, but I understood why that decision was made because
You didn't commit a crime or anything?
No.
You were just out of control in
Mhm.
school? Or
Yep.
out of control at home?
Everywhere.
Mm.
Everywhere. I was in an alternative school by the time I left. So, and an alternative school for people with mental health issues, not for people who were not doing well in the setting. And then I had a brief stint in rehab because I accidentally brought liquor to school, which is a whole different story. I was like, you do accidentally, yes. It was in a Sprite bottle that I always carried around. I usually drink Sprite anyway. I opened up the Sprite bottle from the day before in class, and sure enough, there was Bacardi in it, and someone smelled it, and that was that. They were like, you clearly have a problem if you're bringing this to school. And I'm like, no, but for real, I forgot. I didn't know it was in there. I thought this was regular Sprite because I always have that around. So that was it's funny now, but
Well, just one more question.
Okay.
Had you been diagnosed with a mental illness before you went to this?
yes,
Westmoreland?
a variety.
What was that?
Which one?
Tell me.
Bipolar disorder, mood disorder, NOS, dysthymic disorder, clinical depression. There was another one I can't remember.
Were they all provisional or were they just like?
No, I mean, I have my hospital paperwork, because, I wanted to see, I had been to this one particular place 6 times, so I was like, I want to know what they thought of me.
Did it start near the divorce, or was it just
Yes.
throughout the family?
It was throughout my family and stuff, but it started for me once my mom lost custody. That was kind of the pushing point. So we know that licensure does not equal evidence-based practice. We know that. And so, people go, well, if this place is licensed, it doesn't mean they're good. And that's a really important, and it doesn't mean that they're doing what they're supposed to. And they could be falsifying a lot of information. Another thing is that we know that God, I don't think that's spelled right. I don't even think I spelled checked that. Sorry, coercion. It's like, I'm pretty sure I just looked at it and I was like, I'll fix it later. Coercion is not effective in treatment. There's research that says you can't force someone into changing or pressure them into making a decision to get help, because it's not going to stick. It has to be a choice. That's why, when you tell people to go into marriage counseling, both people need to want to be there. Otherwise, it's really not going to work. And you can't force someone. It doesn't work. And this is, the ultimate example of coercion, because, we had less rights than prisoners. We were children, so we couldn't say anything. We weren't even provided, hey, if you feel like you're being abused, here's a phone you can use. This is a number you can call. And there were allegations of abuse at this place. And they did nothing about it. Because, if you told your parents about it, one, that's assuming that you didn't even get caught doing that. Well, they prepped your parents and they said, they're manipulative and they're going to say anything they can to get out of there. So you ran the risk of not being believed if you mentioned it. So it was just easier to not. And the people who were, often abusing us were often people who had a say in whether I got to leave. So do you just sit and take it, or do you try to, complain about it and then make it worse for yourself and be perceived as manipulative and that you're not progressing? There was a lot at stake. It was easier to just be silent. But coercion doesn't work. It doesn't work. We also know that there's a policy right now. And this is true in our government. There's a policy to not interfere with parent decisions. They cannot interfere. So let me say this. I know that there's like Woodland Hills and places like this for the purpose of and I should have said this at the beginning, for the purpose of this presentation, I'm talking about places that are private. Because even state-run, the state is responsible for these services when it's state-run, at the end of the day. When it's private, and the parents made the decision and paid the cash to send these kids here, who do you point the finger to?
So private run are like
money from loans, money from cash. They would advise your family on how you tax evasion, on how to take out loans, how to take out a second mortgage. A lot of people went through Sallie Mae and took out lots of loans. I knew one of my friends, her mom depleted her 401k to send her there. People were putting everything on the line.
So these are actually for profit.
Yeah, they're yeah.
For a lot of profit
Yeah.
instead of providing treatment.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Wow.
So there's a policy to not interfere with parent decisions as long as they're not in danger. Well, if you don't know that piece, you can't interfere. Also, treatment is not a one-size-fits-all. We talk about cultural competency in our field, and meeting the client where they're at and what need is going to be best for them. This system completely contradicts that concept because I dealt with chronic suicidal ideation. There was a girl there with Tourette's. There was a guy there who was a suicide loss survivor. One of my friends was addicted to meth and was skipping school. We were all dealing with a variety of issues that were all the results of trauma, but we weren't being treated. We were being treated all the same way. It wasn't like an individual, meet you where you are, and this is what we're going to do for you versus someone else. and the counseling was just talking to someone once a month, if that, and you might have been in trouble and that's why you were talking to them. So this was the treatment. I don't know why we allow these places to exist and we do this like universal approach when, you know, any other treatment, we would never do that. We would never, you know, be okay with that because it's like, well, you don't know if it's going to work for this mental health issue or this mental health issue. But it's, again, a one-size-fits-all. And developmental needs are not met. So this is something that I think is really interesting. We know stages of psychosocial development. Okay. So when we're going through, and this is by Eric Erickson. So as we, you know, develop, there are different things that we are working through, different things that we're trying to accomplish. And so, and it's coded by what age you are. So I want to look at this specifically, the two green ones. Identity versus role confusion. This is what happens when you're a teenager. You know, that's why it's so important we let teenagers express themselves and be their individuals and kind of find who they are, because they're trying to figure that out. Well, if you put someone in a program where you're not allowed to do your hair, you all have to wear the same kind of clothing. You can't talk to your friends who kind of help you develop that sense of self. You can't engage in any hobbies. How in the world are you supposed to do that? How do you do that? You can't. So, you know, the alternative is role confusion. I mean, you don't know who you are. I know it took me a really long time to detox from this place. It took me years to figure out, like, that when I was brainwashed into, like, that I, like, didn't really know who I was and what I felt because I had been told what to think and feel for a very long time during a time where I was supposed to be figuring that out independently. And then, you know, the next developmental need is intimacy versus isolation. Well, if you get stunted here, this is going to be impacted a little bit. Not to mention, you know, I just told you all of the restrictions with, you know, forming relationships. And also, this place made it really hard to be friends with people because, you know, basically the more you told on each other, the more you could be trusted. So it was hard to have authentic, genuine, trusting friendships without concern of, like, well, if I say this to them, are they going to tell on me? And if they don't tell on you, and someone finds out that they knew about it, then they're in trouble. I mean, it was, you know, I mean, group consequences happened a lot. So, you know, think of the implication of what's happening when we're, you know, during our core developmental stages, and when we are in an environment where it does the exact opposite. It doesn't make it possible for you to do that. Yes, sir.
Yeah, you've been pouring your heart out there, Samantha, so hopefully this isn't too much. But if I get this right, you ended up marrying someone from the program?
Someone that I met while I was kind of still there. I was working a part-time job in the community, but I was...
They weren't part of the program, though?
No, they weren't.
Okay.
No.
For some reason, I was going to say...
That might have actually not been so bad, because at least it'd be someone who understood that crazy place. No problem. So what now? And I'm going to do this pretty quickly. We need research. Badly. Unbiased research. Not research by the places that are, you know, actually doing this treatment. And we also need federal oversight. You know, the licensing varies state by state, and those are the people who are responsible. It is no coincidence that a ton of these places are in Utah. It's because their licensing regulations are very, very, very lenient. So these places are able to just, you know, come and go as they need to. That's why, I mean, if you do the research on this, a lot of them are from Utah. And it's not a coincidence. They have the ability to kind of just do what they need to. We need to change license regulations. You know, the fact that we can license a place and there doesn't have to be anything evidence-based about it is a problem. Like, we need to make sure that the places that we're giving the stamp of approval on actually is doing something helpful. We need that proof. I know that we're pushing that more in our field, but it's time to change this piece, because otherwise more places are going to keep coming up and we're going to be saying okay to it.
I mean, even with our programs, I mean, I'm in Head Start and with all my collaboratives, even with, you know, state licensing can come in anytime, and if there's one complaint or something, they're in there. It doesn't sound like that's what is happening in these.
Well, and that's assuming that a complaint has to get to them.
Exactly.
That's the problem. You know, if they're creating all these barriers to seek out someone to come and check it out, they can't even come and do that. And then the last thing is that we need resources for people like me who have gotten out of this, because something that I really struggled with is I wanted to find someone who could talk to me about institutional abuse, because that's what I felt this was. And because this is something that people aren't aware of, and because it's a really hard thing to explain, we're all kind of isolated. And like I mentioned I got on a Facebook page, and I just connected with all these people from across the country who have been through this. One of them is in Clarksville, and I'm going to meet soon. I'm really excited because it's like someone who's been through it, but not through my place. Because all of my friends, you know, everybody I'm in contact with is, you know, we all shared a similar experience, and we can, you know, sway each other's perspective, whereas, you know, they have their own set of experiences. Yes,
So
ma'am.
you say, you know, it was difficult to build friendships and trust individuals.
Yeah.
And you just said that you're meeting people
Mhm.
that went through a similar situation.
Yeah.
What about your friendships of individuals that have not went through the things that you have went through? How is that difficult? Because they can't relate to your background?
I think they just, well, I think my friends really don't. I mean, my friends from high school, they really don't understand what I went through. And actually, no, it's really hard to explain, to really get a good grasp on this. So I'm going to show you a trailer of a documentary that Showtime just came out with. It's called Kidnapped for Christ. And it's basically what I went through, but in like Tranquility Bag. And my sister saw this, and then she came over and she was like, I had no idea that that's what you went through. Like, I had no idea that's really what it was like. And it was the best thing that I could. So I'm going to show you, I'm going to end on this one, because I think that this is going to be, because this has been my tool for people who don't understand it. Like, you see the visual to it. And then we're going to. Okay. Sorry, guys. We're going to make sure that the volume is up all the way. Come on. There you go. This is not comforting. Shoot. Man. Sorry, guys. I'm trying to, well,
Open time is here.
so I was like, it's 10:30, and now I can't show you this.
You said it's on Showtime?
Yeah, it was. I don't know if it is now. Kidnapped. Let's see if I can find it.
It's called Kidnapped for Christ.
Kidnapped for Christ, the movie. And it actually was filmed during a time that I was in my program, which I thought was very interesting. But they only recently released the film because they were having
Legal issues.
So, okay, let's see if I can. Maybe this will be louder. Because so you probably can't hear this, can you? Okay. Well, here, we're a small enough group. Let's meet.